Hello folks, welcome to my channel Java Demystified by SSR. Here comes the question number 16. What is OOP? Explain OOP concepts briefly. Let's demystify this question. OOP stands for Object Oriented Programming, and OOP is based on object model. Now an object model comprises of classes and objects. OOP is a methodology based on object model that helps to organize complex programs through the use of object-oriented principles. And there are four major object-oriented principles: encapsulation, abstraction, inheritance, and polymorphism. The OOP main aim actually is to solve complex problems, because earlier to this there were programming paradigms. For example, procedure oriented programming paradigm, and the languages are of such type are actually C, Pascal, etc. With the help of POP, we can actually write software, or we can solve problems which are actually ranging from small to medium, but not the enterprise applications, complex software. The reason is POP has certain limitations or some drawbacks. So those things we'll actually see in detail. Hence, OOP has emerged, especially to solve the complex problems. That's why object-oriented principles came into existence, like inheritance, polymorphism, and abstraction and encapsulation. Let's understand in detail. Yeah. So this is object-oriented paradigm. So where several objects were communicating each other to solve actually the complex problems. So before to this object-oriented programming, we have a POP, as I'm telling you before. And in POP, the program is comprised of a series of user-defined functions. So if you see here, we have n number of functions, and each function has local data. Of course, you have the global data, where the global data defines the problem statement or the problem, and these functions will actually share this global data, and that's how we actually solve that particular problem. But there are a number of issues associated with this model, because this is a closed-ended model, since it uses top-down approach, and focus actually is on procedures or writing functions rather than concentrating on data, because data was given in global variables, and n number of functions are actually sharing it and using it. So there was no proper security for global data. There is no access restriction to the global data. So data security was major concern. And since this data was used by a number of functions, a change in data will actually cause change in a number of functions. Because of this, maintenance was a bigger issue. The code actually becomes like a spaghetti code. You don't know which function is doing what, and which change in variable changing the behavior of the functions. And of course, there are some other things like we cannot able to create new data types. We have to make use of the existing primitive data types. Because of all these problems, these programming languages confined to only a specific area. These programs are good and still used today, but confined to embedded systems, writing system softwares, etc. But in order to make software for enterprise applications, such as a banking application, any airline reservation, railway reservation, or any e-commerce application, we require a programming paradigm that can actually support frequent requirements, a frequent change in the requirements, and which can scale up on daily basis. So such kind of programming paradigm was actually OOP, which uses object-oriented programming principles, and based on the object model, which comprises of classes and objects, the complex problems now can be solved. And that methodology is an open-ended methodology. As long as your problem exists, your software continues to grow and solve that problem. Let's now understand the advantages of object-oriented programming. In OOP, the focus is on data rather on functions or procedures. So in contrast with the POP, object-oriented programming, that means the programming orientation is towards object. So object actually is data. So the focus is on data rather than writing algorithms or procedures. And it follows the bottom-up approach, so it is an open-ended solution. It can grow to different sizes, and it is scalable, and it can be maintained as long as it grows without any issues. And as we discussed, the program is organized by classes and objects, and we can actually create data types easily, because every class that we create in OOP is an abstract data type, and you can create variables of such kind, and you can actually make up a pure object oriented programming with the help of all classes and all objects that are available as part of the API that is defined by these programming languages. So hence OOP is a methodology that helps to organize the complex problems, and that helps to organize to write complex software with the help of object-oriented principles. Let's now understand what is an object briefly. Any real-world entity is considered to be an object, and to be specific, that real-world entity should have a state, should have behavior, and it should have identity. That should be uniquely identifiable. As an example, if you see, a Daniel score is object. A Daniel score, my car, your car, or somebody's car actually is an object. So that is uniquely identifiable, which has certain state, certain behavior, and identity. What is state? The state is nothing but that data that is associated with that particular real-world entity. Behaviors are the implementations, how it acts and reacts when the data changes is actually captured through the behaviors, that is implementations, and those are represented as part of methods, and which has an identity which can be uniquely identifiable. If you observe the difference here, I am saying Daniel's car is an object, but car is not an object. This student is an object, but student is not an object. This laptop is an object, but laptop is not object, because we don't have anything really, something called laptop or something called student, person, man, animal, fruit, etc. We'll have a specific car, specific laptop, this man, that student, this book, your book, my book, these things will exist. Classes are abstractions, objects are the real world entities, they are tangible. As an example here, Daniel's car has some properties. The state is the values of these properties. So Daniel's car has ash color, and it is BMW, and it has 50 kilometers speed as of now. So this is the state of an object, and there are behaviors associated with it. It starts, it stops, it changes speed, etc. Yeah. Let's now move to class, understand classes briefly. A class is a blueprint that defines variables and methods common to all objects of certain kind. In order to put this thing in simple words, a class is a blueprint that defines objects of certain kind. It's a blueprint from which objects can be created. You can also understand a class is something from which the objects can be created. A class is used to manufacture or create objects. A class can also be understood like this. A class is a collection of objects of similar types. That means a student class, from a student class we will have all student objects. From a book class we will have all book objects. For a person class we all have all person objects. That is the meaning actually saying a class is collection of objects of similar types. Otherwise you can understand a class as a blueprint where objects can be created, because objects have variables and methods, and a class can be understood as a template from which objects can be created, and any number of objects can be created from a class. So for example, I have a class car. I can actually have n number of objects created: car 1, car 2, car 3, car 4, car 5. So my car, your car, some X car, some Y car, etc. Car is a class, and your car, my car, and somebody's car actually the objects of that particular class. So you can understand that with some examples I have shown here. So this is the car. This is an abstraction that doesn't exist in reality. What exists in reality is my car exists, your car exists, somebody car exists. These are all objects. So when you define a class car, you just define its properties and its possible behaviors. But when it comes to the object, that is my car, then my car has some color, some speed, some seating capacity, some fuel type, etc. That's actually the difference. In the same fashion, if you see dog, class dog, that is an abstraction, that's a class. A dog doesn't exist in reality, but my dog exists, your dog exists, and somebody's dog exists, and this dog exists, that dog exists. This dog color is white, the dog color is black, and it is brown. But if you say class dog, that is an abstraction that doesn't exist in reality. That has some properties, color will be there, type will be there, etc. But that doesn't have the state. When you associate the state to those properties, it becomes an object. Hope the class and objects have been understood properly. Now let's move to object-oriented principles. So as I told earlier, the classes and objects will comprise of an object model, and object-oriented programming is based on that particular object model. When you write a program with classes and when you are creating objects, you also will make use of the concepts like encapsulation, abstraction, inheritance, and polymorphism. So these actually make your program to scale up and solve complex problems. Let's now understand the abstraction simply. As it was given here, abstraction is the process of hiding the irrelevant details and exposing only the essential features of a particular object or particular class, whatever it may be, because object and class are interrelated. Object is considered to be an instance of a class, and n number of objects can be created from a class. In order to have a object, you have to define a class, and from that class you can actually instantiate objects, right? So all these features will applicable to, all these principles will be applicable to classes and objects in OOP. So abstraction is process of hiding the background details and exposing the essential features. As an example, if you see here, when you see a car, so we will actually see what is the color of it and what fuel type it is, what is the seating capacity, okay, what is actually the mileage, cost, etc. So these are all actually things that we come into the mind, but we actually never think of the background details, irrelevant details, like what is engine model, how it works, okay, and all other internal details we will not bother actually, because that is complex. So complexity is solved with the help of abstraction. For example, if you go to an ATM, you just insert your card and just you do some operation like withdraw or deposit just by pressing the buttons or touching the screen, and your job is done. But you will not actually think too much about how actually you are getting the money. So how the coordinator is performing, how the cash dispenser is working, what is actually happening to the background database servers or the web servers, what kind of programming language might have been used over there. All these are actually internal details and you will never bother about it. So that's the beauty of the abstraction. So at the background, you have much of internal details and you don't bother about that. And what is the functionality that is provided is important to you. So that is actually possible with the help of abstraction. So in Java, we have the implementation units for this abstraction. We have a class which has some abstraction. We have an abstract class which actually provides 0 to 100% of abstraction, and we have interfaces that will provide 100% of abstraction. So varying levels of abstraction is possible in Java with the help of classes, abstract classes, and interfaces. Okay. Let's now move to the other concept called encapsulation, and one of the important concepts. Encapsulation is wrapping up of data and methods into a single unit. You wrap your data and methods into a single unit. So let me make you to understand this. In order to do this, I'm actually making like this. So a class actually represented as a rectangle, and a class has of course two compartments, and an object is represented as a circle. And from a class you can actually have n number of objects created. Okay, so this is one object that has created. In the same fashion, you can have n number of objects created. It can be n, so n can be anything actually. Okay, so a class actually have two compartments. The first compartment is actually data. So this is the data part, and the second compartment is actually behavior part or implementations, which actually nothing but methods. So these methods are called functions in C and C++. In Java, we call these functions as methods. What is encapsulation? Wrapping up of data and function into a single unit. So what is that single unit? That single unit is actually a class, and when class is manifested, we will have objects. Objects are manifested through class actually. So that means you can create n number of objects. So encapsulation units in Java are class and its objects. So here what we are doing is we are wrapping up of this data and methods into a single unit. So that means we are tying together these things tightly. Okay, that means this data, this particular data can be accessed only through these methods. That's what actually wrapping or combining or tying together both data and methods. So that what happens, any other class, for example here you have some other class, any other class cannot access your data straight away. And it has to come actually through proper channel, and that proper channel is methods, because these methods only access this data. That's what the wrapping that we have done, so that your own implementation exists across all. That means that is what implementation independence. And because data now is tied with methods, so it cannot freely move around the system. Nobody else can actually have direct access to your data. So we restrict this access to data. So there will be a data security which is actually lacking in procedure oriented programming languages. That's how this encapsulation will help. The data, that is variables and methods, are tied together into a single unit. And if at all I want this data, for example, this class is a customer class, I want customer data, I require a method which is defined within this particular class, and I create an object of this particular customer class here in my class, and then I can actually call this method. Through this method only I can access this data. This is how the data is secured in Java, and that is possible with encapsulation, where the data and methods are tied together. So hope encapsulation is clear. So let's move to the next principle. Yeah, that is inheritance. Inheritance is considered to be the pillar of object orientation. If there is no inheritance in object oriented programming languages, then it is called object based language. So that much importance was given to inheritance. There are object based languages like JavaScript was there, Visual Basic was there, where there was no inheritance. But there are objects, but there is no inheritance. Those languages are actually called object based languages. Okay, so missing inheritance is not going to be object oriented programming language. It is considered to be the pillar of object orientation. What is inheritance? Inheritance is the process of acquiring properties from one class by other class. So here, let me show you with some diagram. You can have a class, let's say this class is A, and there is another class called some B. Now this class B actually can acquire all the properties of this particular class A. Okay, so what I'm telling is, this is the class B and this is the class A. The class B now can acquire all the properties. What are all the properties in a class? A class contains data members, all the data members, all the method members now are available to this class B, because it is actually in inheritance relationship. This inheritance relationship is also called easy relationship or specialization by generalization relationship. So that what happens is, this particular class which is actually acquiring the properties of class A, that is actually called superclass, and now this class is called a subclass. Otherwise the class A is base class and the class B will be derived class, and class A is parent and class B is actually child. So we have different terminologies to describe this inheritance actually. So now this class B acquires all properties from this particular class A. So that what actually happens? So you already have a class that is written, that is working well, that is debugged. Now you have a similar kind of class is required, but with few modifications or few changes or few new behaviors. What you can do is simply you write a class that extends actually the existing class, so that all existing class data members, methods, everything are available to you. That is the first thing. Second thing, you can actually have your own features added to your subclass. And third thing that is possible is, you can actually redefine the behaviors which are provided by your parent class. This concept actually is called overriding. Through inheritance, three things are possible. You have two classes to make actually the inheritance is possible: superclass and subclass. Superclass is the class from which we are actually acquiring the properties, and subclass acquires the properties. When inheritance is defined, the subclass can have all the properties of the parent class. That means all the data members and methods. To be specific, all non-private members of the superclass. And second part, the subclass can have its own members and methods. And third is, the subclass can redefine or override the behaviors which are acquired from the parent class. Okay, so with this inheritance, code reusability is achieved. We can reuse the code so that the faster development will happen with the Java. So then we'll move to the next principle and important principle of Java, object-oriented programming, is polymorphism. Poly means many and morphing is actually changing. So the ability to take many forms actually is polymorphism. Let me clear these drawings. Yeah. So if you see this particular diagram, this actually best explains what is polymorphism. I have actually a method called speak. I have a method called speak, and this method speak is called on an object called cat, and cat speaks differently. When the speak method called on dog, it speaks differently. When it is called on duck, it speaks differently. When the speak method is called on a man or a woman, she or he speaks differently. That means the ability to take many forms. Same speak method has different forms when it is called through or invoked through different kinds of objects. That is a polymorphism. Yeah, the ability to take more than one form is actually polymorphism. And in Java, because Java is an object-oriented programming language, polymorphism is possible through methods and methods only. Whereas in C++, polymorphism is also possible with operators, because we have operator overloading over there. But here in Java, polymorphism is possible only with methods. We have method overloading and method overriding. Method overloading happens in a single class. Method overriding happens whenever you have inheritance. So whenever you have inheritance, at least two classes will be involved in the inheritance, right? Yeah. So now if you see another example of a polymorphism, I have a draw method, and this draw method is called on a triangle object. It prints triangle. The draw called on circle, it prints circle. Draw called on square, it prints the square. That means a method behaves differently on different objects. So this is actually a method overriding. So method overloading means having a method many times in a class with different parameters, different types, and different order, actually different type and order. So order of the parameters, type of the parameters, and number of the parameters, as long as they are different, you can actually have the same method possible in a single class. That is actually method overloading. Okay, so these are actually as part of a polymorphism. Okay, so we have covered the four important principles of object-oriented programming, namely abstraction. We have understood just with an example called ATM or a car, and then we have encapsulation, which actually provides data security, and then we have inheritance, the pillar of object orientation, where a class acquires the properties from other class, and finally polymorphism, that is possible with methods in Java, where that method takes a different that method behaves differently with the different objects. Hope you have understood what is object oriented programming and what are the major principles of object oriented programming. To sum up, object oriented program or object oriented OOP paradigm or programming is based on object model, which comprises of classes and objects, and it is a methodology to solve complex problems with the help of object oriented principles. I hope you have understood. If you have understood properly, please like my videos, share to your friends and colleagues, and also subscribe to my videos. Thank you. Thanks for watching.